"Ma'am, this meeting is executive only. You'll need to wait outside." Those were the words that changed everything. Spoken to a black woman standing outside her own boardroom. A woman who had built the company from scratch. A woman who owned the majority of shares. A woman whose name was literally on the building. What would you do if they told you that you didn't belong in your own boardroom? Have you ever walked into a room where you felt instantly unwelcome? Where every eye seemed to question your right to be there? Where your very presence felt like an intrusion to people who should have been celebrating your success? Well, that's exactly what happened to one black woman CEO on what should have been the most important day of her career. But here's the thing. What she did next didn't just shock everyone in that room. It sent shockwaves through the entire corporate world and changed the game forever. Do you know someone who's been underestimated because of how they look? Have you witnessed moments where talent was ignored simply because it came in a package that didn't fit someone's narrow expectations? If you're nodding your head right now, then you need to hear this story. Because this isn't just about one woman's fight against corporate racism. This is about what happens when you push the wrong person too far. This is about the moment when quiet strength transforms into unstoppable power. Meet Zara Blackwell, a name that would soon become legendary in Silicon Valley, but not for the reasons anyone expected. At 34, she had built a tech empire worth over $2 billion. Her artificial intelligence platform was revolutionizing how companies operated. Fortune 500 giants were lining up to partner with her. She was living the American dream. But on this particular Tuesday morning, when the security guard blocked her path with those devastating words, she had no idea that everything was about to change. She had no idea that the very people she trusted, the board members she had carefully selected, were about to deliver the ultimate betrayal. And she definitely had no idea that her response would be so swift, so calculated, and so devastating that it would make headlines around the world. Before we go any further, I need you to do something for me. If you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or excluded from spaces where you belonged, hit that like button right now. And drop a comment telling me about a time when someone underestimated you. Because trust me, by the end of this story, you're going to feel a whole lot better about standing up for yourself. Now, let me tell you exactly what happened when they made the biggest mistake of their corporate lives. To understand how devastating that moment truly was, you need to know who Zara Blackwell really is. Back in 2015, Zara was just another brilliant mind buried in a cubicle at a major tech firm in Austin, Texas. While her colleagues were discussing weekend plans, she was coding late into the night, working on something that would change everything. She had discovered a way to make artificial intelligence actually understand human emotions, not just recognize them, but truly comprehend what people were feeling and respond accordingly. Her bosses at the time, they dismissed her work as too ambitious. They told her to focus on smaller projects. So Zara made a decision that would define her entire career. She quit. Using her life savings of $23,000 and working from her tiny one-bedroom apartment, Zara founded Equitech in 2016. The name stood for everything she believed in: equality through technology. Her mission was simple but revolutionary. Create AI that could eliminate bias in hiring, lending, and decision-making across every industry. The early days were brutal. Zara survived on ramen noodles and 3 hours of sleep. She coded 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. When her laptop broke, she couldn't afford to replace it for 2 months. But she never gave up. Her breakthrough came in 2018 when a small startup used her platform to transform their hiring process. Within 6 months, they had increased their diversity by 340% while also improving employee performance across the board. Word spread fast. By 2019, major corporations were knocking down her door. Microsoft wanted to buy her out for $50 million. Google offered $75 million. Netflix came in at 100 million. But Zara said no to all of them. She knew she was building something much bigger. She was right. By 2021, Equitech was valued at $2.3 billion. Fortune 500 companies were paying millions just to license her technology. She had offices in 12 cities and employed over 800 people. Zara Blackwell had officially become one of the youngest black female billionaires in American history. But success this massive required serious investors, and that's where things started to get complicated. Zara assembled what seemed like the perfect board of directors. There was Richard Thornton, a respected venture capitalist who had funded 3 unicorn startups. Marcus Chun, a former Goldman Sachs executive with connections across Wall Street. Patricia Williams, a seasoned tech veteran who had helped scale several companies. David Rodriguez, a legal expert who specialized in corporate governance. At first, they were her biggest supporters. They praised her vision, celebrated her wins, and helped her navigate the complex world of high-stakes business deals. Board meetings were collaborative, respectful, and productive. But as Equitech's value climbed from hundreds of millions to billions, something shifted. It started small. Comments about her aggressive communication style when she pushed for faster growth. Suggestions that she should consider bringing in more experienced leadership for certain decisions. Questions about whether she was ready for this level of responsibility. Zara noticed that her ideas were being questioned more frequently in meetings. When she proposed expanding into international markets, the board suggested waiting. When she wanted to invest in research and development, they recommended focusing on short-term profits instead. Most concerning of all, she began hearing through industry contacts that some of her board members were having separate conversations, meetings she wasn't invited to, discussions about the company's direction that somehow didn't include the founder and CEO. If you're enjoying this story and want to hear more incredible tales of Black excellence and resilience, make sure you subscribe right now and hit that notification bell. We share these powerful stories every week because they need to be told, and your support helps us reach more people who need to hear them. But Zara had no idea just how deep their betrayal would go, until that Tuesday morning changed everything forever. The first crack appeared during a board meeting in March 2022. Zara was presenting her plan to expand Equitech into the European market when Richard Thornton interrupted her mid-sentence. "Zara, sweetheart, slow down a bit. You're getting a little emotional about this." Emotional. The word hit her like a slap. She had been speaking with the same passion and intensity she always used when discussing business opportunities. But somehow, when it came from her, passion became emotional. She took a breath and continued her presentation. But something had shifted in that room. The microaggressions started small. Comments about her hair when she wore it natural versus when she straightened it. Suggestions that she should smile more during investor calls. Questions about whether her communication style might be intimidating to potential partners. During one particularly frustrating meeting, Zara proposed launching an AI tool specifically designed to help small businesses access fair lending. She had spent weeks researching the market, analyzing the data, and building a comprehensive business case. Marcus Chin barely looked up from his phone. "Interesting idea, but I think we should focus on our core market for now." The proposal was shelved. 2 weeks later, Chin presented almost the exact same idea to the board, claiming he had been thinking about ways to expand our social impact. The board praised his innovative thinking and approved the project immediately. Zara sat there in stunned silence as her own idea was celebrated, with someone else getting the credit. This became a pattern. Her suggestions were dismissed as premature or not fully thought through. But when the same ideas came from her male board members weeks later, they were brilliant strategic moves. The boys' club was becoming more obvious by the day. Board members would arrive early and chat about golf games she was never invited to join. They referenced conversations from dinners she didn't know had happened. Important decisions seemed to be made before meetings even started, leaving her feeling like she was always playing catch-up in her own company. Patricia Williams, the one other woman on the board, seemed to go along with whatever the men decided. When Zara tried to connect with her privately, Patricia was polite but distant. "You need to pick your battles, Zara," she said during one brief conversation. "Not everything is about race or gender." But it wasn't just one thing. It was the way they questioned her judgment on deals she had successfully negotiated before they joined the board. It was how they suggested bringing in additional expertise for areas where she had already proven her competence. It was the subtle implication that her success was somehow lucky rather than earned. Zara started documenting everything. She recorded meetings, saved emails, and kept detailed notes about every interaction. She told herself she was being paranoid, but the evidence was mounting. The breaking point came during a strategy session about a potential acquisition. Zara had identified a smaller AI company that would perfectly complement their technology. She presented her analysis, showing how the acquisition could increase their market share by 15% within 6 months. "I think you're overcomplicating this," Rodriguez said, not even looking at her data. "Maybe we should have our team do a more thorough analysis." "I am the team," Zara replied, her voice tight with frustration. "I built this company. I understand this market better than anyone." Thornton leaned back in his chair. "Zara, no one's questioning your contributions. But as we scale, we need to make sure we're making decisions based on logic, not emotions." There was that word again. Emotions. After the meeting, Zara sat alone in her office, staring out at the city skyline she had once looked at with such hope and ambition. Now it felt like a view from a prison cell. She was the founder, the majority shareholder, the CEO who had built this company from nothing. Yet somehow, she felt like a guest in her own boardroom. Every day brought new challenges to her authority, new questions about her competence, new reminders that no matter how successful she became, some people would always see her as an outsider. The isolation was crushing. She couldn't talk to her employees about it. They looked up to her as their fearless leader. She couldn't discuss it with industry contacts. It might make her look weak. She was trapped in a nightmare of her own success. But Zara Blackwell hadn't built a billion-dollar company by backing down from challenges. She just didn't know yet how far her own board members were willing to go to push her out. Tuesday, September 12, 2023. The date that would change everything. Zara arrived at Equitech headquarters at 8:45 a.m. for the 9 o'clock board meeting. She had her laptop bag, her presentation materials, and a new proposal that she was certain would silence the doubters once and for all. A major tech giant had approached them about a partnership deal worth $500 million, the kind of opportunity that would cement Equitech's position as an industry leader. She walked through the familiar halls of her own building, greeting employees who looked up to her with admiration and respect. These people believed in her vision. They trusted her leadership. They saw her as the brilliant entrepreneur who had given them career opportunities they never thought possible. But as she approached the glass-walled boardroom on the 15th floor, something was wrong. The lights were on. She could see figures moving around inside. The meeting had clearly started without her. Zara quickened her pace, checking her phone. 8:48 a.m. She was early, just like always. So why was everyone already there? She reached for the door handle and pulled. Nothing. The door was locked. Confusion washed over her. In 3 years of board meetings, that door had never been locked. She knocked on the glass, trying to get the attention of the people inside, but they seemed to be intentionally avoiding eye contact. "Excuse me, ma'am." Zara turned to find Marcus, the security guard she had hired personally 2 years ago. A man she had promoted from part-time to full-time because she believed in giving people opportunities to grow. "Marcus, the boardroom is locked. Can you help me get in?" I think there's some kind of mistake. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his eyes not meeting hers. Ma'am, I was told to inform you that this meeting is executive only. You'll need to wait outside. The words hit her like a physical blow. Executive only. In her own company. Her own boardroom. Her own building. I'm sorry, what did you just say? The board members said this is an executive-level meeting. They said you'd understand. Zara stared at him, her mind struggling to process what was happening. Marcus, I'm the CEO. I'm the founder. I own 51% of this company. How am I not executive level? The security guard looked as confused as she felt, but he had his orders. I'm just doing what they told me, ma'am. They said no exceptions. Through the glass, Zara could see her board members deep in conversation. Charts and graphs were spread across the table, materials she had never seen before. Patricia Williams was taking notes. Richard Thornton was pointing at what looked like legal documents. This wasn't just a meeting she had been excluded from. It was a meeting that had been planned without her knowledge. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her assistant. The board requested that I not put today's meeting on your calendar. They said they would handle scheduling directly with you. Did you get their message? The realization hit her like a freight train. They had deliberately scheduled this meeting without telling her. They had instructed security to keep her out. They were conducting business, her business, without the founder and CEO. But why? Zara pressed her face closer to the glass, trying to read the documents on the table. What she saw made her blood run cold. Corporate restructuring plans. Executive transition timelines. A document that looked suspiciously like a buyout proposal. They weren't just excluding her from a meeting. They were planning to remove her from her own company. The humiliation was overwhelming. Here she was, standing outside her own boardroom like a rejected job applicant, while the people she had trusted were systematically planning her downfall. Employees were starting to walk by, heading to their morning meetings. Some of them noticed their CEO standing alone in the hallway, clearly distressed. The whispers started immediately. Why isn't Zara in the meeting? Is everything okay with the company? Why does she look so upset? In that moment, Zara understood something that shook her to her core. Despite everything she had built, despite every success she had achieved, despite owning the majority of shares in her own company, these board members had never truly seen her as the leader. To them, she was still just the black woman who had gotten lucky with a good idea. They had been patient while she played CEO, but now it was time for the real executives to take over. Have you ever been in a situation where people you trusted completely betrayed you? Have you experienced that gut-wrenching moment when you realize that no matter how hard you work or how much you achieve, some people will never see you as equal? Drop a comment below and share your story, because what happened next will give you hope for anyone who's ever been underestimated. But as Zara stood there, watching her board members plot against her, they had no idea that she had been preparing for this moment her entire career, and what she was about to do would shock them all. Zara didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't storm into that boardroom and demand answers. Instead, she walked calmly back to her office, closed the door, and did what she had always done when faced with a challenge. She got strategic. The first call she made was to her personal attorney, Rebecca Martinez, who had helped her navigate every major business decision since Equitech's founding. Rebecca, I need you to pull out my shareholder agreements immediately. All of them. Zara, what's going on? They just locked me out of my own boardroom. I think they're planning a hostile takeover. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Rebecca's voice came back, sharp and focused. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't sign anything. Don't say anything to anyone. Just sit tight. While she waited, Zara opened her laptop and began reviewing the corporate governance documents she had filed when Equitech became a public company. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard as she searched for the specific clauses she needed. And there it was, the detail that would change everything. When Equitech went public, Zara had retained 51% ownership of the company. But more importantly, her shares came with special voting rights that gave her the power to make unilateral decisions about board composition. It was a protection she had insisted on, despite her lawyers telling her it might make investors nervous. The board members had clearly forgotten this crucial detail, or maybe they had never bothered to read the fine print. Rebecca arrived with 2 additional attorneys and a briefcase full of legal documents. They spread everything across Zara's conference table and began building their case. "Here's what we know," Rebecca said, reviewing the evidence. They scheduled a board meeting without notifying the CEO and majority shareholder. That's a clear violation of corporate governance rules. They're discussing company restructuring without your input, which breaches their fiduciary duty to shareholders. But Zara wasn't satisfied with just the legal violations. She wanted everything. For the next 48 hours, she worked around the clock gathering evidence. She reviewed email chains that showed board members coordinating meetings without her knowledge. She found phone records proving they had been discussing company business in private conversations. She discovered financial documents they had requested from accounting without her authorization. Most damning of all, she found text messages between Thornton and Chun discussing the transition plan and how they would manage the optics of removing her as CEO. Her assistant, loyal to the end, provided additional evidence. Meeting requests that had been deliberately kept off Zara's calendar. Conference calls she had been excluded from. Even dinner reservations at exclusive restaurants where board members had gathered to discuss company strategy. Every piece of evidence painted the same picture, a coordinated effort to push out the founder and CEO of her own company. By Thursday morning, Zara had built an airtight case. She had documented every violation, every breach of duty, every illegal action taken by her board members. She had legal precedent on her side and the voting power to back it up. But most importantly, she had something they had underestimated: the fury of a brilliant woman who had been betrayed by people she trusted. Rebecca reviewed the final documents one more time. "Zara, you have the legal right to remove every single one of them. But once you do this, there's no going back. Are you sure you want to go nuclear?" Zara looked out the window at the company she had built from nothing, at the employees who depended on her leadership, at the future she refused to let anyone steal from her. "Schedule an emergency board meeting for Friday at 9 a.m. and make sure everyone gets proper notice this time. If this story is resonating with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear about the power of preparation and standing up for yourself. These stories matter, and the more people who see them, the more we can inspire others to never give up." The countdown to justice had begun. Friday morning, 9:00 a.m. sharp. Zara walked through the doors of Equitech headquarters wearing her most powerful navy blue suit and carrying a leather briefcase that contained the future of her company. Her heels clicked against the marble floor with the confidence of someone who owned every step she was taking. This time, there was no locked door waiting for her. As she approached the boardroom, she could see her board members already seated, looking comfortable and relaxed. They probably thought this was just another meeting where they could continue their plans to push her aside. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Zara pushed open the glass doors and walked to the head of the table, her rightful place as founder and CEO. The room fell silent as she set down her briefcase and opened it with deliberate precision. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice calm and controlled. "Thank you all for coming to what will be our final meeting together." Richard Thornton looked confused. "Zara, what are you talking about? We have the quarterly projections to review and—" "No, Richard, we don't." Zara pulled out a thick stack of documents and placed them on the table. "What we have is a serious problem that needs to be addressed immediately." The board members exchanged nervous glances. Patricia Williams shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Marcus Chin put down his phone for the first time in months. On Tuesday morning, I was denied access to this boardroom by security acting on your orders. I was told that a meeting about my own company was executive only and that I needed to wait outside. Zara's voice never wavered. That was your first mistake. She pulled out the first document. This is a record of every meeting you've held without my knowledge over the past 6 months. 14 separate gatherings where you discussed company business, made strategic decisions, and planned restructuring, all without the CEO and majority shareholder present. David Rodriguez tried to interrupt. Now, Zara, you're taking this out of context. I'm not finished. Her words cut through the room like a blade. This is a violation of corporate governance law and a breach of your fiduciary duty to shareholders. But it gets worse. She placed another document on the table. These are text messages between board members discussing transition plans and how to manage the optics of my removal. Messages that prove you've been planning to force me out of the company I built. The color drained from Thornton's face. Chin was frantically typing on his phone, probably texting his lawyer. And this, Zara said, pulling out the final document, is your termination paperwork. The room erupted. You can't fire us. Patricia Williams stood up, her chair rolling backward. The board doesn't answer to the CEO. Zara smiled for the first time since entering the room. Actually, Patricia, you're wrong. You see, when Equitech went public, I retained special voting rights as the majority shareholder. Rights that give me unilateral authority over board composition. She turned to face each of them directly. You forgot to read the fine print. Rebecca Martinez, Zara's attorney, entered the room with 2 legal assistants carrying additional documentation. These termination letters are legally binding and effective immediately, Rebecca announced. Each of you has violated your duties as board members, and Mrs. Blackwell is exercising her legal right to remove you from your positions. This is insane. Thornton jumped to his feet. Zara, be reasonable. We've been trying to help you grow this company. Help me. Zara's voice finally showed emotion, controlled anger that had been building for months. You locked me out of my own boardroom. You made decisions about my company without consulting me. You planned to remove me as CEO of the business I created from nothing. She walked around the table, stopping behind each board member as she spoke. Richard, you're terminated for breach of fiduciary duty and violation of corporate governance. Patricia, you're terminated for participating in unauthorized meetings and failing to represent shareholder interests. Marcus, you're terminated for conspiring to make financial decisions without proper authority. David, you're terminated for providing legal advice that violated your ethical obligations to the company. Each board member sat in stunned silence as the reality of their situation became clear. They had underestimated the young black woman they thought they could manipulate and control. Chin made one last desperate attempt. Zara, let's talk about this privately. I'm sure we can work something out. Maybe some kind of settlement. The time for talking was before you decided I didn't belong in my own boardroom, Zara replied coldly. 2 security officers entered the room, new guards that Zara had hired that morning. Gentlemen, please escort these former board members from the building. They are no longer authorized to be on company property. The next few minutes were chaos. Thornton argued loudly about his contracts and threatened legal action. Williams gathered her things with shaking hands, muttering about how this isn't over. Chen tried to negotiate until the very last second. Rodriguez warned about potential lawsuits and regulatory issues. But one by one, they were walked out of the boardroom, out of the building, and out of Zara's company forever. As the room finally fell silent, Zara stood alone in her boardroom, truly alone for the first time in years. The weight of what she had just done began to sink in, but instead of fear, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Relief, and the satisfaction of justice served. Within hours, the story exploded across every major business publication in America. Black female CEO fires entire board after being locked out of her own company, read the headline in Forbes. The Wall Street Journal called it the boardroom revolution that shook Silicon Valley. TechCrunch labeled it the most savage power move in corporate history. Social media was on fire. The hashtag Zara Blackwell was trending worldwide within 6 hours. Black women executives from every industry were sharing their own stories of boardroom exclusion and workplace discrimination. Young entrepreneurs were calling Zara their new role model. But the real transformation happened inside Equitech itself. Zara didn't just fire her old board, she rebuilt it better. She recruited Dr. Angela Thompson, a former NASA executive with 3 decades of leadership experience. She brought in Hassan Patel, a venture capitalist who specialized in diversity-focused investments. She added Maria Santos, a former Fortune 500 CEO who had successfully scaled 4 different companies. The new board was 60% women, 70% people of color, and 100% committed to Zara's vision for the company. The results were immediate and stunning. Within 3 months, Equitech closed 2 major partnership deals worth $750 million combined. Employee satisfaction scores reached an all-time high. The company's stock price jumped 45% in 6 months. Industry analysts who had questioned Zara's leadership abilities were now calling her a visionary who understood that diversity drives innovation. But Zara's biggest transformation was personal. She started the Blackwell Foundation, dedicated to funding Black women entrepreneurs who were struggling to access capital and networks. She launched mentorship programs connecting young Black girls with successful tech leaders. She spoke at conferences around the world about the importance of representation in corporate leadership. Most importantly, she used her platform to shine a light on the systemic barriers that Black women face in business. She shared her story not for sympathy, but to show other women that they didn't have to accept being marginalized in their own success. "I didn't fire that board to get revenge," she said in an interview 6 months later. "I fired them to show every Black woman watching that you don't have to smile and accept disrespect just to keep the peace." Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is use the power you already have. Her company continued to grow, her influence expanded globally, and her story became a case study taught in business schools across the country. If you're inspired by Zara's story and want to hear more incredible tales of Black excellence, resilience, and triumph, make sure you subscribe to this channel right now. We share these powerful stories because they need to be told, and your subscription helps us reach more people who need to hear them. But the most important lesson was still to come. Here's what Zara's story teaches us. Document everything. Know your rights. Never let anyone convince you that you don't belong in spaces you've earned. Zara won because she was prepared. She kept records, understood her legal position, and refused to accept disrespect. When they tried to push her out, she had the tools to fight back. If you're facing workplace discrimination or being underestimated, remember this story. Your preparation today could save your career tomorrow. Hit that like button if this story inspired you. Drop a comment sharing your own experience with workplace challenges. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more stories that celebrate Black excellence and resilience. Your voice matters. Use it.